Right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our Clients Only California call. Thanks for joining us today. Avis, you got anything you want to get us started with? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. We did talk about last week on the last call about traces. Make sure that you have a plan for your traces and for how they come in. Even make sure that you're keeping record of how quickly you're taking care of them. That way you've got something in your corner should an audit be triggered by these. So just think about that. It is the next quarter. Our second quarter, so it's time to do inventories again. So make sure you're doing that and letting us know about your inventory and how it went. If you need us, if you need help finding out how to log into the system, if you need a refresher, please, you don't have to know how to get in. Just email us at info@fflguard.com and we'll be happy to set something up. We'll walk you through it. That's what we're here for. Don't rely on always picking up on the phone, because sometimes we've got people in the air, we've got other people on the phone. There's only so many of us and a whole lot of y'all. So just remember, either use a ticket or you can email us at info.com. That's the easiest one to remember. Remember, info@ffl.com, and make sure you're doing
Guard.
Oh, info@FFLGuard. Yes, I'm sorry. info@fflguard.com. So I'll pass it back to you. That's all I've got today.
All right. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that great reminder. Mike, what do you have for us?
A few things like the last call, and I apologize for, I think Ken was on there and Sam also. So you're going to be hearing me repeat the same things, but I know you're only give more time for Mr. Michele to cover a lot of topics California for later. So just a few things I went over before. Remember, during your inspections, only your RPs should be talking to ATF when they come in, either agents or IOIs. Your employees, they should not be talking to your employees, addressing your employees. Let the IOIs know that any questions they have, they're to come to you as the RP or whoever your designated RPs are. Make sure you keep up on employees' certification and make sure they're not prohibited. We've seen some FFLs recently in the past year, I was going to say at least 3 maybe, that had a prohibited employee, one very recent within the last week. So make sure they are not prohibited, because they are not allowed to be around firearms, touching firearms, have possession of firearms, etc. That would be grounds for revocation of your license. Multiple sale reports do not have to be made for pawn firearms, consigned firearms, or repair firearms. We've had some issues with that recently also, where ATF was telling some FFLs that they had to report pawn firearms as multiple sales. That is not the case. So if you have any issues regarding that from ATF, let us know. We can point you to the right direction, but it's on the form. That's on the multiple sale forms, and also under 478.126A. That's the violation. I mean, that's the regulation that you don't have to report pawn firearms, especially pawn firearms. Also, we're seeing inspections. We're seeing a different change from ATF where they're going. They're focusing a lot right now on, of course, your Gun Control Act record, required record, but they're also focusing on what they should have focused on upon your original application, and then subsequently your follow-up inspections, and that's being lease agreements and zoning authority. So if your lease agreements that you have filed with ATF or showed ATF don't say you can operate a firearms business from your premise, they're going to ask you to have someone from from the corporation, LLC, whoever that landlord is, give a statement that you have the right to operate a firearms business from that premise. And also they're looking at zoning, making sure you are zoned to operate a firearms business from your premise. So please, if you got time, make sure that you are still zoned appropriately and that your lease says you can operate a firearms business, be it manufacturer, be it importer, be it a dealer from your business premise. Also, we're seeing, we had a couple things, I think, and this one might have been on our e-blast regarding a NICS background check. If you get a delay and you document that delay, and then you get a proceed and you document that proceed on the 4473, and then you get another delay. There's nowhere to put that second delay. You are to put that in block 32 on the ATF form 4473. So just keep that in mind going forward, and hopefully that you won't come to that. But we've seen that it seems to increase this year for some reason. I don't know if it has to do with NICS, what's going on with NICS or what, but it's been an unusual amount of increases in those delay, approve, delay. So it's kind of strange, but keep that in mind. Block 32 is where you would document that second delayed response from NICS. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'll kick it over real quick to Hank. You give us a little rundown.
Absolutely. One thing I would just want to mention really quick, I don't want to make assumptions that we're all old hats in the room here and that there may be some, new accounts out there. To Mike's point about prohibited individuals, always remember it's federally prohibited individuals. Just because your state says that those things are okay doesn't mean that federally that person isn't a prohibited individual. I've run into this in the past with some clients in states that have legalized marijuana and things along those lines. It's not your state; it's the federal oversight that you've got to watch out for. Putting that aside, as we know, for those of you that are seasoned individuals, we're moving into the doldrum season, the slower time of year for our industry. For those of you that are feeling a year-over-year pinch on the amount of business, you are not alone. The market conditions in general, I looked at the California-specific stuff, the West Coast-specific stuff, and nationally, and everyone's feeling the pinch right now. But I also look at the summer doldrums as a real positive for a business as well too, and that is it's time to work on your business, doing your gun audits and making sure that everything is up to snuff there, and doing your audits when you want to, not when you have to, when ATF comes to knocking on your door and says, hey, let's look at your books. Doing inventory audits of things that are not firearms, working on processes, procedures, the way that you're doing business, revisiting waivers, because maybe there's been a legal change in the last year and you've got to modify your waivers to meet those new legal implications or expectations of your facility. To point towards Alexis's seminar that's coming up later this week, getting your ducks in a row on your business, getting your operating procedures, your employee manual, your waivers, your forms, your all of that. How do I run my business profitably in the way that it's running right now is super imperative on the overall valuation of your business. I have worked with folks that have sold their businesses, and I can tell you it's a painful process when they look to sell it and they don't have those processes and procedures. They don't have a coherent employee manual. They haven't worked on the functionality and being able to communicate how I run this business to the next owner. And fundamentally, that business sells at some fractional percentage of the inventory value plus a little bit of goodwill. And that's it, unless they own the building. Whereas ones that are well choreographed, well documented, where you can literally hand and say, here's how I did things profitably in this business to the next owner, that business sells for significantly more than what the basics, plain Jane, here's my business, here's my inventory type scenario. So using the time that's given to you in these slower times of year is a gift. I can say it truthfully. As a former owner, it's a gift to work on your business and get everything polished up from that perspective. From a sort of tail of the street perspective on products, West Coast is no different than nationally. I have never seen the level of market consolidation around 9mm that I've ever seen in this industry in my 37 years. You could pretty much run a business right now just focusing on 9mm ammo and products related to handguns and pistol caliber carbines around the 9mm caliber right now. So if you're making those cash flow decisions right now on what to inventory and what not to inventory, I'd put a lot of weight on things that are in the constellation of 9mm handguns and pistol caliber carbines and things along those lines right now, than to go afield and go into other directions, unless the deals are just really, I can't say no to that kind of situation. So yeah, my advocacy for folks to keep the slower time of year cash flow rolling, focus on 9mm right now. It's again, take my wisdom. With 37 years of industry background, I have never seen this level of consolidation ever in 37 years. So I would definitely be advising all of you to focus your cash flow in those arenas right now.
Thanks, Hank. I really appreciate it. One last thing before we jump over to Chuck, which is a reminder that hurricane season is going to be swinging around not too long. In the late spring, early summer for folks, lots of flooding in your areas. Have a disaster plan. Be ready for what may happen. You know, usually things like floods, hurricanes, fires, there's a lot you can do to prepare ahead of time to be sure that you're on top of it, and that you have the right information so your insurance carrier will pay out appropriately. So definitely don't forget, it's time to take a look at those things as well. So anyway, thanks. And now I'll turn it over to Chuck.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So one quick thing, I hope everybody knows about the certificate of eligibility program that DOJ has. Every employee at CRP, you're not allowed to do a criminal background check on prospective employees in California. But so CRPA has every employee get a certificate of eligibility, a COE, which basically is a background check, so that because they have to be around guns. So if you want to know if your employees are prohibited, it's not a bad idea to have that, because if they become prohibited at any point, they get a notification and their COE gets revoked. On lawsuits, still watching the Supreme Court. The Snopes semi-auto ban challenge was trailed again till next week. So they'll have a conference on Friday again on that, and then there may be a rule that they're going to take that case on Monday. Likewise, the magazine capacity case, which the name I forget, I think it's Queen City Tactical or something like that. 10+ round magazine challenge that has requested the Supreme Court to grant cert. Supreme Court has been reluctant to grant cert in many of these cases because they are brought up on appeal from a preliminary injunction rather than from a final judgment. Preliminary injunction is by its nature preliminary. And the Supreme Court likes to see fully developed, fully baked cases that have had a trial and all the evidence introduced and all that. Those two cases are pending, and we don't know what's going to happen with them. Meantime, the Duncan case, the magazine case out of California, we will be filing a petition for cert in the United States Supreme Court in the next week or so. And that's a case that if they don't take Queen City Tactical, they will take. I'm fairly certain they will take the Duncan case. It's been up there before. That was, if you haven't seen Justice Van Dyke's YouTube video that he referenced in his dissent to the 7-4 loss of the en banc panel in front of Duncan, that is just glorious viewing. You're going to want to see that. What else? There's several cases still in the Ninth Circuit on semi-autos. CRPA's Rupp case and the SAF case Miller are both there, but they're basically in limbo, as well as some of the other cases. The Rhodey ammunition background check case has now requested some more briefing, so that's in motion against now that Duncan came down with the en banc decision. The Bolin case, which is CRPA's case challenging the roster, is back in motion as a result of the Duncan ruling. So we'll be filing more briefs in those cases. Getting ready to sue Santa Clara over their $2,000 cost for applying for a CCW or getting a CCW. We're getting ready to sue LAPD because they're taking 18 months to 2 years to get a CCW. We've sued LA County Sheriff. They're shortening their CCW issuance time. And the big news out of that was that the United States Department of Justice is now involved and has opened an investigation into LA County Sheriff's patterns and practices in delaying the issuance of CCW. That's gigantic because the United States Department of Justice has a lot more leeway and a lot more authority and a lot more investigative power than a lawsuit does, where you conduct discovery. You can send them, interrogatories, but the DOJ just has a wide open field, and we're in contact with the DOJ regularly now, the DOJ lawyers, and we will be using them or urging them to get involved in LAPD, Santa Clara, and any place else that is dragging their feet or charging too much to get a CCW. So hopefully that opens up the market for some carry handguns that you guys can sell. CRPA has its gun show ban case in front of the Supreme Court. That's going to be heard on the 24th. So that's coming up too. Whether or not they take it will be. Looking at my list here, trying to knock out the tax. We've been working with a law firm in DC that had a few experiences with this in Illinois, and unfortunately they did not factor in that when you want to challenge an excise tax, you have to exhaust your administrative remedies first, which means you have to go through the process at the tax agency and lose, and then you can go to court. So now they're back at the tax agency going through the administrative process to challenge the tax within the agency, and then they'll go to court. It's very similar, I think, to what happens with an ATF revocation hearing. You got to go through the ATF hearing process before you can go to court. I think that's about it, unless folks have questions. I think what we probably ought to do is next time we have this meeting, let's have Rick Travis, the CRPA's lobbyist, come on and talk about the bills that are up there. I know there's one that would convert a CCW license period from 2 years to 4 years, which should cut the red tape and cost associated in half at least. There's one that was of particularly relevance to FFLs, which I'm sorry, I'm not completely familiar with, something about doors and security and whether you had to go by the final fire code or the penal code. And some people were having a problem figuring out how they had to comply with that for security doors. I think there's a bill that would clear that up. I believe it passed on consent, so it may already be on the governor's desk. I'm not sure, but that should solve some problems and some confusion about what the state requires you to have for security, access security. But yeah, we should have Rick on to talk about more of the stuff that's going on in Sacramento with our next call.
Absolutely, will do. Anybody have any questions, any comments that we can address before we adjourn? Okay.
All good?
All right. Sounds great. Well, everyone have a great week, and we will talk to you again soon. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.